Hello there, Sam Ogren here from Paperback Friends, and today I thought I would answer the question for you: should you read The Old Man and the Sea? So, first off, what is it even about? Well, I'm sure you've heard about it, but in case you haven't, it's about this old fisherman who hooks a big fish and then he is dragged out into the sea, and then it is this long, arduous struggle, man versus nature. Will he be able to bag the fish or will the fish get away? And that is essentially what the entire short story is about, without spoiling any details. So, 4. Should you read it? Well, like I said, short story. It's actually a novella, so not a novel, meaning that it is quite short and it won't take you too long to finish it. And this is obviously good because if in case you don't like it, it's not that much of a struggle to punch through. And in that sense, it is also concise because, like I said, the story itself is not super deep or complicated in that sense. It's man versus nature. Will he prevail or not? There's also a lot to pick at with this short story. And what I mean with that is that there's a lot of symbology, a lot of
Symbology? Now that Duffy has relinquished his King Bonehead crown, I see we have an heir to the throne. I'm sure the word you were looking for was symbolism. What is the symbolism there?
ideas of philosophy, these big overarching concepts that I think is the most common thing that people walk away from with this short story, and why they find it so moving, because a lot of people tend to do that. It's because of its messaging. It has very powerful messaging about struggle, about stoicism, about life, about manhood, about age, man versus all of these things. And you gotta hand it to Hemingway there, that he did pack a lot in a very small amount of pages. It's also a classic, so if you want to make your way through the classics, or if you want to deepen your understanding of literature as a whole, I think this is a good place to kind of start, to be honest, especially if you're more of a casual reader, or if you read mostly fantasy, sci-fi, or some, so to say, lighter genres, or at least not as heavy in terms of their cultural significance. Then this can be a good place to start, and without passing any judgment whatsoever. I mainly read sci-fi and fantasy, so, but I do tend to dabble into this other kind of stuff because I find it interesting, and when one of these types of books are really good, they really slap. Okay, so what speaks against reading this one? And I'd say that first and foremost, I do think that it is highly overrated. There is stuff to pick at in this novel, like I said, but I think a lot of people overestimate some of the simplicities and some of the way it's written and making more of it. Because while Hemingway does cram a lot of things in there, at the end of the day, there isn't really a lot of shit happening. It's this dude, he's in his boat, and then Hemingway describing how the rope hurts his hands when he's tying knots, and then, oh, he's holding it, the sun is scorching him. Ah, life hard, wah. Writing wise, of course, this is a matter of taste, but I think it's pretty poorly written, to be honest. There is this idea that Hemingway's style is very direct and to the point, and while that can be true, you can also do that in a good way. So, for instance, Orwell, not always, but George Orwell has this way of writing, especially in his autobiographies, besides the times when he goes off on weird rants, which he does in every single, well, maybe not in well, this isn't about Orwell, but to the point doesn't just mean crummy writing. It means you're writing to the point, but in an interesting way. And I don't necessarily think Hemingway does that. Sometimes his grammar is just weird and awkward, and I'm like, what is? Oh, that's a sentence. That's what he meant. It's so weird. And some people are like, oh, that's whimsically artistic and great. I'm like, no, it's just shitty writing. Stop it. You're that's a poorly written sentence. Just because Hemingway wrote it doesn't make it good. And like I said, while the messaging is interesting, it can also be very blatant. I mean, it's it's man versus nature for 150 pages. I mean, it's like I said, there's a lot happening here, and what's happening here is that struggle and you may get what you want, but in the end, maybe it's about the struggle more than the reward. It's more about the journey than the actual destination. It's these things that I don't feel as if reading this I feel more enlightened by the end of it. But some of the takes, especially when it comes to masculinity and some of the more subtle stuff, I think is much more interesting than some of the other stuff. But regardless, most of it's pretty blatant and it's hard to ignore that for me. So, conclusion! Should you read it or not? And the answer to this one is, if I were to recommend this to myself, I would say, fuck no! I hate this novel. Sorry, I hate this novella. I don't like it at all. But like I said, there are things about it that I do find interesting, and I do respect it. I'd say that for me, recommending it to myself, I would say no. But to you, well, I do think a lot of people do like it. And because it is short and because it is a classic, I would say that having read it and really do give it a fair shake, it doesn't take you too long, especially if you're an average, if you're a fast reader or of average reading speed, then you'll be able to punch through this without too much effort. And it's nice to have read a classic and then be able to pass judgment on it for yourself. So because it is short, I think you should actually give it a shake, because a lot of people do find a lot of its messaging and some of the stuff in there very rewarding, even though that was absolutely not necessarily my take. If this was as long as Moby Dick, and this is the reason I haven't read Moby Dick yet, because from what I've read about Moby Dick and some of my research into it, seems like, oof, not gonna like that one. But that one's like 400 or 600 pages. Harder to recommend that, but since this one is short, even if you don't like the fight, it's easier to finish it. Cool, thank you so much for watching. My name is Sam Ogren. I run a little podcast called Paperback Friends, and if you want more sort of feelings or insights into what I thought about this novella, you can check out my podcast. I have a review episode for this novella and many others as well. So do check it out if you want to, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the podcast or here at Yautauba.